Good afternoon, everybody. Clearly, we have a difficult lunchtime slot, I think it's fair to say. My name's Rob Fowler. I work for the parcel carrier DPD. I've been with the company for about 9 years now in a variety of different roles. I started in transport, was seconded into a range of different roles, and then spent a number of years actually in property and real estate for us. I did my postgraduate in property as part of my time at DPD. The last 2 years, I've been working on a corporate social responsibility policy and particularly our urban logistics program. So we as an organisation have been looking at how city centres operate and how we as a business operate in city centres, particularly some of the challenges we have around property and how we deliver EVs, how we deliver these air quality issues or how we address the air quality issues that are being talked about. So really, we've broken these challenges down with 3 real problems that we're having at the moment. There's a very well-publicised problem with air quality. Quite clearly, we're seeing in the city centre there are a number of reports come out recently and a lot of coverage in the press that's indicated that transport is really causing an issue for people in city centres. And we've seen the first restrictions coming through public policy and regulation, the ultra-low emission zone, the congestion charging zone, the rollout of a clean air zone framework across the UK. But actually, local authorities are now starting to regulate and make it much harder for us to operate in certain locations. Second part of that, obviously traffic congestion, so there's a lot of pressure on how the public realm works, how planning works in city centres, but undoubtedly there appears to be a push. We have Car Free Day coming this week to make actually the cities more livable for people who are living there. And finally, I just want to talk a bit about property availability. A B8 space is now protected in London in the draft London plan, or hopefully will be. But actually what we've seen historically is a lot of B8 space being pushed out of city centres. The research from Savills shows that rates in Southwark have increased by, I think, 94% in the past 10 years, something in that kind of order. So I really want to focus on London, but actually what we've been doing is building a scalable framework that can work anywhere across the UK. So we've been taking a new operating model, we've rolled it into London, and we have the intention to roll this across the UK. And if you go back to the start of 2018, what you have in front of us is our distribution of warehouses around London. So you can see, with the exception of London City, the majority of those are on the outskirts of the city centre. So to service the city centre in London, we're sending an awful lot of vans down the trunk roads, down the A roads into the city centre. We have around 2,000 routes a day being delivered out of these 11 depots inside London, to give you an idea. So that's 2,000 vehicles we're putting out every single day. And in 2018, we actually only opened 1 depot in London, and that was our Barking depot. And this is really significant, actually, because what we found is that accessing property to build our 7-acre sites, which have got 65,000 square feet of industrial space on it, planning became much harder, costs were going up, and it became very difficult to find property in the right locations where we could build a bespoke shed that gave us the proper profitability that made it worthwhile building. So actually, we're interested in making sure we can maximize how many parcels we deliver through one of these locations. So in 2018, we opened DPD Barking, just down the A13. This is less than 2 miles away from a distribution centre, which we only opened 3 years before. So actually, we're building sheds on top of sheds because that's where we can get land. We built this, we took a 25-year lease, no break, with Segro, who we do a fair few transactions with. We opened it in May, and by Christmas it was full. Okay, there's something like £4 million worth of capex investment just to get that site up and running, and it's full before it's been open for 12 months. So I've got 24 years remaining on a site which is at capacity. And just to give you some example of what's happening with B8 buildings, so what I've got here is a map of London and some delivery areas. So the 2 cubes at the bottom, the one on the left is DPD Barking, and the one on the right is DPD Dagenham. So Dagenham delivers the big grey area, and the pink area is delivered by Barking. So what you can see here is that because we can't access the right types of property in the right part of a city, we're having to run really inefficiently. So if you live next door to DPD Barking and you order a parcel and DPD are delivering it, I will send 150 vans past your door and not deliver your parcel because it will be coming from Dagenham. Okay? So it's a real practical example of how the accessibility and locations of these sites is affecting city centres. Second example, this is our West London and Park Royal depots. Now, they're so close to each other, I haven't put 2 cubes on the map because they're less than 250 yards from each other. Park Royal delivers the yellow area. West London delivers the purple area, right? Park Royal was previously located in King's Cross. Little site, leasehold, sold to resi development for about £37 million. So we can't really compete with that. We had to relocate to Park Royal, and we're now sending all of those parcels into the centre of London, increasing congestion, reducing our productivity, increasing the number of vans we're having to put out to service the city centre. So these are real practical examples of actually how planning, by moving B8 space away from the city centre, is impacting upon transport policy and the way that the roads are operating. So we started to think about how we did this differently. So about 2 years ago, we picked up this idea of micro depots, of smaller locations, high density city centre locations. And what I'm quite glad to be able to say to you is that this is not some kind of pipe dream that we're talking about. We already have 2 of these open inside London, and I just want to talk about it so you can really touch and feel these. You can actually go and see them operating. And in October 2018, we opened our first all-electric depot. So not only were we delivering parcels on all-electric vehicles, but we were trunking parcels as well. So no other organisation in the UK has the capability to do that. So we went out and procured some vehicles to do this. This is an unbelievably well-located piece of real estate. It's located 5 minutes from the House of Parliament, 5 minutes from Buckingham Palace. Now, our normal warehousing and sheds are 40,000 square feet to get us interesting. This is 5,000 square feet. So this is a very small site. It's not automated. It runs simply on a manual process, and we're feeding it from our London City depot. So what this allows us to do is to deliver a very, very high delivery density area in SW1, and it allows us to be incredibly efficient in how we operate. And the business has spent £3 million, or committed £3 million. That's just to cover rent, rates, and vehicle procurement. There's no operational cost. We actually took this building from Transport for London. Transport for London didn't know they owned it, which was quite an interesting conversation to have with them. We are paying a commercial market rate. There is no financial incentives for us to be there. So this is the point, but we're building a scalable model we can deliver anywhere in the UK. This is what it looks like to help you visualize it. Okay, so the reason I put that in is that actually what I'm trying to help people do is visualize the fact that as a logistics organization, we're not just looking for 7 acres, 38 level access doors, docking arrangements, and we're starting to change the search parameters for what we're looking for. If you look at Westminster, it's a non-traditional logistics warehouse that we're using for logistics. If you look at our Shoreditch depot, that's railway arches. We have an application with Westminster Council for 8,000 square feet of space in a car park located underneath Hyde Park. Okay? So we are looking at a range of properties that we would never have previously considered. If I'd have said to the business 4 or 5 years ago, I want to take 5,000 square feet, they'd have laughed me out the door. Okay? But our world is changing because the city centres are so difficult to service. And that's why I really wanted to come here today, because I'm trying to unlock people who have got access to portfolios which have got opportunities for us which are perhaps underutilised, under-commercialised, but we can give you some asset value. We can help come through planning applications with jobs. We can offer employment. We can offer it at zero emission, and we can help people to tell a great story. Okay, so that's really why I was interested in coming to the conference today. I want to talk about some electric vehicles, first UK operator to run micro vehicles. So because our delivery density out of these depots is so small, I'll just load it twice a day. So instead of needing a massive 3.5-ton Sprinter, I'll put a small vehicle out and I'll load it twice a day. In fact, I'll load it 3 times a day. So we imported these from Norway, first UK operator to do them. I can deliver 137 parcels out of one of these vehicles in a day. That's our record that we got to so far. Because actually, B2C traffic is generally speaking smaller, so ASOS bags, we go nice and small, we go nice and flat pack. So actually, we don't need necessarily the same ratio of enormous vans to small vans anymore. This for Nissan EMV200, we now have about 85 of these in the UK. We believe we have the biggest parcel carrier zero-emission fleet in the UK. We have 139 vehicles on fleet. We've committed to delivering 600 by the end of 2021 as well. So we really believe in what we're doing here. And we also are now running electric 7.5-ton vehicles. There's only 10 of these in the country. We went out and bought 2. But we're using these for trunking. So the point is we're changing our whole operating approach and the way that we procure vehicles and the way that we operate to enable us to work out of properties like this. So actually, some of the people we're talking to who have got retail holdings, who actually have already built loading bays but aren't really doing anything, which are designed for me to put vehicles like this into, we're starting to talk to them about what we do with their space and how we help them commercialize it. And the final thing that we're doing at the moment to make these little sites work, we actually went out and built our own cargo bike from scratch. Right, we decided that we couldn't buy one, so I spent 3 months tripping around Europe, trying to find one. Couldn't find one I like, so we are working with a British engineering startup. We've just taken our first 10 of these bikes. We're going to help them push them into our European counterparts, because DPD has 23 business units around Europe. We love this. This is my baby. I absolutely love it. It's going to be great inside London. It's going to access bike lanes, all those types of things. But all of this is around building that city centre infrastructure for people. Headline numbers to come out of the Westminster project, 45 tonnes of CO2 a year, which we're taking off the road. We used to send 18 diesel vans in from our London City depot to Westminster. We're now running about the same number of vehicles, but they're all zero emission. On top of that, 49% reduction in the number of miles we're driving per parcel delivered. You know, as an efficiency point of view, effectively halving your mileage is absolutely fantastic. And the reason we get that benefit is because these 18 vans which we're driving into a city centre and back, dead time. Whereas in our DPD Westminster facility, you're walking out the front door, your first stop is next door to you, basically. So we now have 13 London depots that we've been rolling out. So you can see Westminster and Shoreditch have arrived in the middle. But we actually have a plan to cover all of London. So this is not just a bit of a pipe dream. We want to cover all of London with this model. And that's the whole point. We have the assets and the infrastructure around the edge of London to make this viable. What we're trying to find is those plots in city centres, those retail spaces, those unused spaces, those car parks, which people aren't doing anything with, that I can help do something with, basically. So we have Westminster, forgot about the clicks. We have Shoreditch, and we have an option coming forwards in Hyde Park, like I say. The next thing which we're doing actually is sort of offering our expertise to people that we're taking sites from. So we've built a very technologically advanced charging infrastructure. So my charging infrastructure I can monitor from the centre. I'm building an infrastructure that I can run fleets for in 10 years from now when you may be running thousands and thousands of vans. So what we're not saying to people is upgrade your infrastructure and your electrical supplies. Let us make the most of it using the technology that we have available to us today. But actually, key considerations for why I'm here are quite straightforward. Property is enabling micro-distribution, small vehicles, cargo bikes, zero-emission delivery, clean final mile, reduction in congestion, all these great pieces of information, which is why, as a business, we've generated over £400,000 worth of public relations value work without spending any money. Because the coverage, because we've hit the air quality, we've hit the congestion, and we've repurposed the building, and that's why it's been such a successful story for us. And we are actively looking for different types of space, large, small, arches, car parks, whatever people have got, we can use our experience and our professional skills to turn those into something which is useful for people. Really, we want to commercialise some underutilised space, and we're looking for partners who want to help us do this and how we can go through this together. We are interested in helping people design schemes, because nothing frustrates me more than somebody bringing me a scheme and telling me this is great for you and it's absolutely rubbish because they're not an operator. Yeah, that's what we do. That's what, as a business, we're very good at. And we're also seeing an increase in Section 106 conditions coming through, so we have the ability to help people with the consolidation model around this. But what we're looking for, actually, is people who want to make this change quickly. It's incredibly frustrating, I find, particularly around the EV industry. There's a lot of talk, and nobody actually really doing anything. So we are actually doing this, and we are looking really proactively looking for partners to do this with. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob, if you'd like to take your seat. That was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to bringing on your two fellow panelists to continue the discussion. I'll introduce them by name as they come along, but we'll go to them to give us a few more details about themselves as they come up. So can I ask Julian Burnett and David Johnston to join us on the stage, please? And I'm going to join you, gentlemen, to discuss what we've heard and draw out a few nuances, because we've got lots of different stakeholders involved in this. We've got a really interesting view from a stakeholder that perhaps delegates to this conference in the past haven't heard from before. But now I've got you settled. Let's, Rob, if we could go to you first, because I was able to describe your job title and you were able to put a bit of context around what you do. Is there anything else you wanted to add about DPD and your role there before we go to David and Julian?
I think undoubtedly we've seen a lot of growth with e-commerce, as you can imagine. Our sustainability is very, very important to us. We are group-led, but we are decentralised, so we're making our own decisions in the UK. But it's an area where we are very, very heavily invested in what we're doing.
Very exciting, brilliant. David, could you introduce yourself and let the audience know a bit about what you do?
Yes, so I'm a real estate partner at a law firm, Wedlakebell, but I also have the privilege of chairing Revo's Sustainability and Community Engagement Committee, although we might need to streamline the name, which is a really great collaboration of various people from around the industry, so retailers, landlords, professionals, where we get a lot of good thinking time and really trying to push what we're doing in this space.
Thank you. Julian, welcome.
Well, thank you, Miya. Hello, everybody. I'm Julian Burnett. I lead IBM's business here in the UK, retail, consumer products, travel, and transport markets. Formerly a technology leader from various reasonably well-known retailers, again, here in the UK, and I've spent a number of years helping retailers in their endeavours to drive efficiencies through the last decade of, I guess, upward growth in e-commerce and the challenges that that's placed on their operating models, both the physical and the digital operating models of those organisations. I've also run and operated distribution logistics for one of those retailers, and I've spent time, fascinating story, Rob, I think it's amazing strategy, trying to tussle with this challenge through the viewpoint of both a distribution logistics operator, but also a technologist.
So let me come to you first then. I didn't realise how important property enabling micro-distribution was and the challenges involved. You've worked for a number of high-profile retailers, and now you're kind of on the other side of the fence selling solutions into them. Julian, from what you heard from Rob, I think he made it pretty clear that infrastructure is absolutely key to the future of retail. Why do you think it's so important?
Look, I think it's always been essential for the retail ecosystem, and I will call it that rather than retailers, to have physical infrastructure to move fundamentally to fulfill their purpose, which is putting people together with product. And over the last decade, we've seen a dramatic shift in where people are, and therefore where product is. And I think in the last 5, there's been a really significant industry-wide recognition that the separation of inventory from people and place in relation to e-commerce has not been an efficient way of handling what is now a sustained realization that people want things to be where they are, whether that's in stores, whether that's at home, at work, or otherwise. The shift to a demand-led retail ecosystem has put us in a different place forever. And therefore the infrastructure needs to shift correspondingly to address it.
Absolutely. And following on from that, I specifically wanted to ask you about what came out of Rob's discussions about mixed use space and repurposing of it. Is now a good time to be thinking about that? And where do you think the mix of space, no longer being traditionally just for retailers, is going to play out?
It's not only a good time, it's well overdue. We as an industry, have been wrestling with overspace situations, underspace situations, and if you take the total space consideration in UK retail at an ecosystem level, we still are running with the inefficiencies in relation to where things are, what places we're using in the distribution, the logistics, the last mile in stores. And there has to be some consideration as to how we rebalance that relative to people. And not just people that buy in that model, but also who work in that model. You know, labour, particularly in distribution and logistics, is a challenging aspect that needs to be considered too. Yeah. And workers are customers. And actually there's a sort of really challenging set of physical factors that need to be brought to this problem. And I think it's an industry problem. It's not an individual retailer, it's not an individual consumer products organisation, it's not an individual logistics operator, it's all of us.
The whole ecosystem.
And the property organisations, the local authorities and others have a very, very significant voice in this too.
Absolutely. I mean, coming to you, David, from that perspective, Rob mentioned a lot of regulations, a lot of changes coming in. From your perspective, being a partner at Wedlakebell, do you think the industry understands the relationship to the future infrastructure? Julian mentioned all the stakeholders there. Presumably you deal with a lot of them, corralling them together. What's your view?
As a lawyer, you wouldn't expect me to be upset by regulation, because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have us, which I know you all love. But I think actually the key thing is collaboration. So what we can't do is think that we're going to build these wonderful new developments that have the lovely graphics with people living, working, having stuff delivered, and living in this space in brand new buildings. Because the reality is, in 20 years' time, you'll be seeing whatever the percentage, 80, 90% of the buildings, they're the ones that are here now. So actually, it's far more interesting for me to see this, a section of our industry saying, look, do you know what? We've got to do something now. And the way we're going to do it is look at the problem slightly differently. So instead of taking your traditional model and saying, well, let's find a space for that somewhere, you're saying, no, let's find some space. And then you are redesigning your model. But yes, you do then need the collaboration at all levels. So you need the people that own the buildings to understand why it's going to work. You need the people that fund the buildings to know why it's going to work. You need local authorities to understand how it's going to work. Because actually, I think local authorities get a bit of a bum deal sometimes. They have lots and lots of other stakeholders that they have a responsibility to, whereas we tend to have one specific thing that we want to deliver. So yes, I think the collaboration is absolutely vital. I think that phrase you said, the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem is what we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go on,
Rob,
Julian.
could I ask you a question?
Of course.
Sorry to interject.
No, please.
I've got a burning question for you, Rob. Were another operator to come to you and ask for access to your endpoints, would you consider it?
So we have some examples from our Chronopost group in Paris, where we're starting to develop hybrid shapes. So the DPD group is owned by La Poste, but they also own Chronopost and Seyer and some different organisations. And they are starting to facilitate it in Bordeaux at the moment, where you're looking at, say, a third of a warehouse and a split third, which fluctuates between operator. You're also looking at a situation where you use mutual facilities. So, you know, there's no point in building two sets of welfare blocks into adjoining warehouses. Why not put them together? Yeah, actually, as an organisation, we coexist on the same industrial estates at the moment as all of our competitors. Now, if a building happens to be divided in two, or the value of space in cyber city centres is so great that you wouldn't take anything off the table at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting answer, and I think it highlights that we are thinking about this, at least, not maybe doing it in some examples, yes, but I think back to your question about mixed use, it is absolutely overdue.
Yeah.
But the fundamental truths of retail remain. This is about serving customers who live in places, work in places, and want product. But we mustn't overlook the employment challenge as well. And actually the utilisation of labour in this model is as challenging as the utilisation of space.
Absolutely.
I think the interesting bit for me is when you're talking about residential developments coming forwards with retail developments, with every other variable in there, if you're not careful, freight gets forgotten about, and we become the poor partner at the end. Now, if you look at some of the big schemes in London where they're building 10,000 units, if you look at the way planning policy and transport policy are working together, planning is pro-residential, but it's anti-car. Okay, private car hire is undoubtedly down. Private car occupation or single car use, excuse me. But at the same time, we have the London plan coming through in the Mayor's transport strategy saying we want to take vans out. Now, if you're going to take cars out, is there a social decision that has to be made that says, actually, we're going to accept that? And the example I use is that 5 years ago, everybody went to pick up their shopping from Sainsbury's. 5 years later, a significant amount of people in this room will put their hands up and say they get it delivered. Now, the point of that is that because private car use has been discouraged and being taxed and being, whether it be ULEZ or whatever else, is people are turning to delivery as an alternative way to get the produce and goods. And the bigger kind of societal question is, ultimately, if a city is there to serve the people who live in it and the way that it functions, well, actually, if freight becomes a core part of that, it has to be considered as part of that. And what we are doing is responding to the demands of people who live in cities. We're not running vans around for fun. We are very much responding to what people are demanding.
And looking at the generational changes, so nobody in this room, but people are not expecting to own a house. People aren't expecting to own a car. If you talk to a 10 or 11-year-old, they will use a car. Some of them don't expect there to be a driver in the car, which is terrifying. But they're not expecting to own these things. And I think lots of what we have been building for years and years and years has all been built around the fact, well, somebody will want to own this. So, and actually, many people now are talking about using things, not owning them. And I think that then just has to really factor into what we're trying to provide them with all the sessions we've seen so far today in terms of place, experience, what we do with our time, which is probably going to be the most valuable resource we have.
It strikes me, I mean, you're having to go first in so many aspects of what you're proposing, including your charging infrastructure. And that as well needs to be considered in terms of utility. I mean, surely if we're moving towards EV as a standard model of execution at this kind of scale, that level of infrastructure investment can't be borne by your company alone.
No, and if I'm honest
equally,
with you,
nor can the telecommunications infrastructure that's required to support this kind of operation. 5G is only just coming, and we all know that we're still struggling with the patchiness of 4G. You depend upon connectivity.
Absolutely. If you look, so I was part of the TfL EV task force as one of their members, so who we offered some advice. We've done an awful lot of work as part of my sustainability work around on-site storage solutions, direct wire connections to transmission networks, these types of things, because we're starting to think about it. But if I'm honest, the perception that I get back at the moment is if you want it, you're going to pay for it. We lease all of our buildings, generally speaking, apart from our strategic locations. So I'm going to spend £5 million on an asset in my road outside, upgrading some infrastructure, but if I've only got 10 years left on my lease, I've got to depreciate very quickly and wave goodbye to. And that's why we're using smart management solutions as part of our load management inside the building, because actually I'll just take that down and take it with me. And I think if I was sitting on the landlord side, from an attractiveness point of view, decent quality electrical supplies is something which you'd be looking at thinking, that makes a lot of sense, it's worth putting some money into.
But policy-wise, who should be paying for that? Is that something that actually should be provided by central government? Because the reality is central/local government have some of the powers to install in a way that a private landlord, private occupier doesn't. And they also have the longest term view of who their stakeholders are.
They've got all the stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
in that sense.
Particularly in a mixed-use development where there are
Absolutely.
people serving many purposes,
Absolutely.
working and living and so on.
Absolutely. But the one representation we don't have on the stage at the moment, just to close this area of discussion off, is what have we identified that we need from retail property owners as a result? I think we've been very clear on shining a light on some of the issues that, Robin, you've experienced through DPD in terms of local authorities. If there was anything that retail property owners could do now to help you, what would it be?
I think, look, I'm not a retail specialist, as you're well aware. I would be looking at my portfolio thinking, what can I do slightly differently with it? And my point being here is to show that there's a demand going to be coming around repurposing these portfolios to do something different with them. Now, whether or not that be a 10-storey multi-storey car park that you fill the top level with solar panels and you have some batteries on the ground floor to charge vehicles, I'd be starting to think about different solutions like that. And we're talking to some people around flexible space arrangements. So you run your car park as a standard arrangement. What if we only take a bit for 12 hours a day, overnight? And I can guarantee your rental income for the next 10 years. That's got to be pretty attractive to people. And I would be starting to think about flexible leasing arrangements. I would be starting to think about the kind of just general, a more intelligent use for some space, which is just sitting around. And that's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to this stuff, but no one's doing anything with it.
Yeah, the thing I was shocked by, just chatting before we started, was I had this vision as all DPD sort of facilities, huge haunch height, loads of racking, everything automated.
Yeah.
And it's not like that everywhere.
No, we're looking at facilities where we will have no greater height requirement than a 4x4. Okay, so we don't rack, we don't store, we're a transient business. We will collect over 1 million parcels today and deliver them tomorrow. We don't put them all in racks and wonder what to do with them. We just get them and we deliver them. So we don't need racking, we don't have lots of point loads, we don't have all these types of things which put people off. What we want is a space to take some parcels off one vehicle and put it onto the other.
Yeah,
So that's
so-
what we're interested in.
Julian.
So it comes down to asset management, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does, and if I could talk to one massive big asset in the retail ecosystem, and that's stock.
Yeah.
And I'll answer your question through two viewpoints, if I may. Retail occupier and retail owner,
Yeah.
and often they are one and the same, but not always. Is your network bi-directional? And if it is, then we have an efficiency gain to be had, because an awful lot of stock sits in shops doing nothing
Yeah, and
until
reverse
it's
logistics
bought.
as
And
well.
if you could place your model in reverse, and for retailers to accept that an ability to pick from store to fulfill local orders locally, rather than pick from stock in central warehouses and move them out through other people's networks and into yours, that could drive a huge efficiency, because we would be looking at a reduction in inventory overall, because it would be in the right place to serve people where they are. And so use of the space to hold inventory that can return through a network like the one that Rob's building, or others that I'm sure will develop, could be hugely efficient.
Absolutely.
In many, many levels. Capital efficiency as well as space efficiency.
Yeah.
And labour, because
And labour, we will
picking
get to
product
Absolutely.
from store is a task worth doing
Yeah.
if you can get it to somebody who wants it round the corner.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think you've mentioned efficiency there a couple of times. I think we've actually started to get some answers to some questions, which is really exciting from my point. But if I could come to David from an efficiency standpoint, because you chair the sustainability committee at Revo. I mean, are you seeing this kind of, integration and innovative collaboration in any other areas? Is this throwing a light on
I
places
think
we
historically
can't
the industry has been pretty good at, when evidence has been given to it, it will do something. So when we were talking about energy efficiency, and people started understanding the numbers and seeing how much money was just literally going out the window, going out through the roof, people went, oh, actually, we can sort this out. Then the technology catches up, and it's no longer new news. So are we seeing collaboration? Yes, and we've seen it throughout. Is there sometimes quite a lot of talk and it feels like not much action? Well, yes, but that's because we're trying to push, on that committee in particular, we're trying to push the boundaries and not just say, what's the next energy efficiency? What's the next, little tweaking around EV and power supply? So we're actually trying to think, well, what are these things going to look like in 10 or 15 years' time? Because that's what an organisation like Revo should be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just conscious of time. We would like to give the audience a moment to ask some questions of you as well. I think trying to think of the best way of wrapping up our panel discussion part of this session. And we've talked a lot about shared infrastructure. I think we've got a really good view from DPD's perspective of how you would want to leverage that. Can you, if I come to you in turn, you, Rob, first, as you've kind of focused minds here, what do you think about the role of technology to play in creating a shared infrastructure in cities? I think we talked about the stakeholders, we've talked about the ecosystem, we've talked about the need for collaboration. As a technologist, I talk a lot about, I'm asked to write a lot about smart cities, connected cities, Internet of Things, where various stakeholders can share data between each other and collaborate on a kind of almost seamless basis once you've got those connections in place. So any sort of parting thoughts for us on shared infrastructure from a freight perspective?
Yeah, I think on a sort of technology point, if you look at my organisation, DPD, what we have done is we've got 6 in-flight options to reroute parcels, to improve first-time delivery, to make it more efficient. All these types of things we are already doing, and we've been quite advanced in our technology. I think I see a lot of people bringing ideas forward to me, and I think they're often designed without end-user input is my biggest grievance. And someone will come and tell me that they've got something brilliant, and it's going to change the way that I work, and they don't understand our side. So, like with the design side on the planning application, the same goes for the technology side, is we're talking to people and saying, I want to be in at day one. I don't want you to spend 18 months designing a product and £3 million to come and give it to me and me say it's not worth anything. And I think it's those types of collaborations we're looking forward to try and just find, the marginal gains that we can find are reducing with time, and I get that, but let us help people. I think that's a key point for us as an organisation. Let us help you design something that we want to use and want to have designed.
I heard it once said that there are too many technology solutions looking for problems to solve, and you're looking for ones that solve problems. Julian, bringing that point to you about leveraging shared infrastructure, I know the workforce is a key area, issue, challenge, close to your heart. Anything that you want to talk about in terms of just to round off the discussion around leveraging, how do we best leverage shared infrastructure? How do we factor the workforce into that?
I think, Mark, I could probably bang on about this for days, so containing myself to a simple answer will be a challenge. I think what we've heard, and it's a fascinating conversation, I wish we could carry it on, this is about connectivity on so many levels. Collaboration is served by connection, and connectivity at the business level, connectivity at the human level. And there is an efficiency available through that connectivity if we move to share some of the burden of that efficiency vision, but only if we're prepared to share data at the boundaries of our own operations and co-operations, and that data needs to have a place to flow. And I'll always come back to connectivity, therefore, being the way in which we can participate at the boundaries of our business in exchanging information. When it comes to people, people are a huge positive resource in the retail ecosystem. It occupies my time, as you know, because in first order alone, the retail market employs 7 to 8 million people directly, but when you span out into your world and to all of the other connected parts of the ecosystem, it occupying about 20 to 25% of all people's time. Yeah. And the tax receipts alone of ours, the government really needs to wake up and listen to some of this stuff, by the way. That was a political comment. But the point here is that connecting people at an individual and intimate level into the opportunity of participating in this ecosystem, not just as consumers, but as producers and participants that you can you can see in increasing numbers wanting to work in new flexible ways. And if those new flexible ways are supported by new flexible operating models and new flexible space, then people become part of the communities that they're in, serving both themselves and others. And I think there is this considerable move towards localism, and hyper-localism is served very, very well by connectivity and the data that flows in those connected networks.
Absolutely. So David, to kind of not to put too much pressure on you to wrap it all up, going back to the original topic of leveraging shared infrastructure, we've established the need for it. Do you think there's enough understanding from local authorities and businesses about what's needed? Do you think retail property owners see this as an opportunity? Because they're kind of stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea in that sense, that they see their property uses being increasingly challenged.
I think yes, I do think they see it as, I don't think they're sitting there thinking, oh, this is too big a problem, I don't know what to do about it. I think there are lots of very good people across the industry, in government, in local government, in retail, end users. It's such a multifaceted problem. And from my perspective as a lawyer, I think lawyers need to get together and collaborate together to try and make things simpler. We need to understand that actually it's not the leasing model that's broken. If we're talking about sharing and collaborating, that's not what a lease says.
No.
And so we need to try and get our heads around that. And that means we need to talk to the money, because the money are the ones that want to know that they've got a fixed, or they've got a certain income coming. So I think it's very easy to throw mud at people like local authorities, because actually they do have a huge role in it. But I think we've all got a responsibility in all our different professions and industries to help this collaboration work.
Yeah, thank you. I think the one thing that I'm going to take away from this is just how important the last mile is to the future of our city, shared infrastructure and sustainability, and the workforce as well. So thank you very much. I would like to offer the opportunity to the audience to ask questions of our esteemed panel. I believe there are some microphones at the back of the auditorium.
Yeah, it is.
I can't see because it's so bright, but if you do have a question, I'd like to pop your hand up. I'll leave the ladies at the back looking for a hand up, but if we don't have any questions at the moment, we have a lady down here. Eager beaver. Thank you. I was about to fill in with a pocket one, but that's fine. Thank you so much for asking a question. Is the microphone on, please, for the...
Hello?
There we
Hello.
go.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackie from Shop Happy, and what we're trying to do is help change behaviours, particularly home delivery behaviours, because they're not helping places. So it's been interesting hearing that sort of logistical argument, but there's certainly something about localism and the marketplace that's really important for businesses, but we do need to set a course where we also help people join the dots, because it isn't just about congestion. I live in one of the most air-polluted places in the UK, and even if you have an electronic vehicle, you are congesting a road. So it is important that we change those behaviours. But it's also about packaging. And so one of the things that I want to put out there is, if you continue in logistics, and there will always be a demand for home delivery, I'd like to reduce it a bit so we help our town centres to thrive in getting people out to click and collect and out and about and talking to people. Yeah. But what are we going to do about the packaging and the landfill?
I mean, maybe I should sorry, Julian, put you on the spot, because you've had view from the inside of a retailer out, dealing with manufacturers, dealing with packaging. Yeah. Then maybe, Rob, I can come to you about the impact of packaging. Yeah, I know from a home delivery standpoint, split pallets, all sorts.
Oh, yeah,
instead of just delivering to stores,
in and of itself, it's
such a huge
it is a challenge. And I think it's again an ecosystem challenge, and it's actually quite a significant upstream consideration, not just in terms of the final mile, because and not in fact just any mile out from the retailer to the consumer. A lot of this happens upstream and happens outside of the control of the ecosystem. And yes, I have had experience of it, and there are ways and means, mechanical and physical, and digital, to try and reduce packaging. One of the things, and this is a fascinating fact, it's really quite difficult to get your head around. The barcode is fundamental here. The barcode today identifies the product, not its packaging, and there's no association between the barcode and its packet, so you can't really be sure that when you see one thing with product in it and see another thing with product in it, that the packaging is in fact following the same standards. You can't also identify where it came from, what's in it as an item in itself. And so there's some work happening. Sorry, this is getting terribly technical, but there is some work happening within the Global Standards Organization, GS1, and I sit on one of their boards, about how we serialize the barcode to represent not just the thing, but the thing it's in. Particularly plastic bottles are a challenge, as we know. We've heard plenty about that, and there's legislation in play at the moment. That's the start of a change that will help us address your point in one dimension. However, I think circular economy is a very, very significant play in here, and the retailers themselves are starting to think about how they reuse and repurpose and ultimately resell. I saw a fascinating, this is weird association, but go and have a look if you get a moment, everybody, at a website called Carlings. They are a fashion retailer. They don't sell fashion. They sell 3D wraparound digital fashion. You don't actually need to own a garment when all you're doing is taking a selfie. You can own it for the moment that you need it, but you don't need to wear it. That's at the outer edge of this, but there are plenty of reasons to think that the industry has, not just through compulsion and legislation, a dramatic interest in improving its performance here, because packaging costs. Not only does it cost to have on the outbound, but it costs to get rid of. And that is a cost borne by many along the value chain.
Absolutely.
Amazon Prime is a bit of a challenge here, because we've become hooked on, and not only Amazon, but those that are giving us subscription, because subscription tends to look like single items, and consolidation used to be a norm, and disaggregation and single item delivery is a challenge in itself.
Absolutely. I would add, before we bring Rob in here, that I've seen some really interesting convenience and grocery store developments around refillables, and I think people are just more likely to go to the store to refill it than trust someone to refill something for them via delivery, so that might be an option. Obviously that doesn't play into DPD's hands, because the deliveries are your bread and butter.
But it comes to another point about getting the means of production closer to consumption, and if you could disaggregate and come to a bulk delivery to a store with store colleagues doing the refills at the point. It's the same as vertical farms, putting small community farms into centres so that fresh produce can be produced by the local people and eaten by the same people.
Absolutely. I mean, bringing Rob in here, complex questions, some really complex issues. What's DPD's view on it?
So we are looking at a range of packaging and changing our packaging. Our existing Express Pack is 100% recyclable already, but we are actively looking at other materials. But I think our big customers, we don't give them packaging. That's for retailers' responsibility, okay? And we ran some surveys through our design space. So as part of our DPD app, we have a method of engaging with consumers. So if you download the app, I hope you all do, we have 4 million plus users. We actually poll our consumers to ask them questions about what do they think on new service arrangements. You can bring us ideas, all these types of things, okay? And we asked them a question about packaging. You can go and find. I ran the analysis that came out of that, and actually a lot of them just said, there is a lot of packaging. Now, unfortunately, my role is to transit parcels from one location to the other, and I can work in partnership with our customers, and that's what we do, but I'm not the one picking and packing, and I think that's the challenge. Now, we are proactively looking at Express Bag offering, because we think that we need to change it. We've got 100% recyclable, but we're looking at other technology and other new things as they come forwards. But it's also about retailers working with us as well.
It is, and I'd just like to add, look, there are plenty of sophisticated technologies at play in the distribution centres around the UK and globally to try and minimise this at a physical level. You know, auto boxing technologies, auto bagging technologies, trying to reduce fresh air. In fact, my entire strategy whilst it led distribution logistics at House Fraser was that. Please, can we eradicate fresh air from this system because it's costing us all dearly, in particularly the planet.
I think as well, we've been doing a lot of work in this area recently. Plastic gets a very bad name, but it's actually about the disposal of the product, which is significant. The majority of plastic, if not all plastic, can be recycled and repurposed, but it's about the streaming and the processes that have followed. It's the disposal which is the challenge, not necessarily actually reusing the material.
It's the single-useness, if that's a word, of certain materials is the issue. So having a plastic that is the same plastic Tupperware that my mum had 50 years ago and is still in use isn't bad material.
No.
But that's the concept we need to get away from.
It comes back to infrastructure at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're up to
recycling
time.
infrastructure
Absolutely.
is
We're up to time, but I just wanted to give David a final word, because as you chair the sustainability a panel board on for Revo, anything you've heard here that you're going to take away that you think Revo's going to work on?
Well, I think actually it is. I think we've talked a lot about collaboration, and I think we need to take that to the next level. So, and it's engaging people like yourself, Rob, in a way that we then understand that logistics isn't just somebody new to the party in retail. It's been fundamental to retail for years. It's just haven't come here. So that it's really taking collaboration to the next level.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to getting an update on how we do with that. And thank you so much, Rob, for joining us, for changing the dynamics in terms of that ecosystem, and also Julian for your insight and expertise as well. I'd like you to join me in thanking the panel, ladies and gentlemen, Julian, David, and Rob.
Thank you. Lovely.